Good evening. I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz. On the NewsHour tonight, President-elect Trump makes his first big White House pick, naming campaign advisor Susie Wiles his chief of staff. What we know about the woman behind his historic return to the Oval Office.
Plus, we hear from voters who share their views on the future of the country in the wake of the election.
I pray that people can work together, but he's going to be there for 4 years. What can we do to make things better?
And how Kamala Harris's loss is once again prompting the question, what will it take to elect a woman to the nation's highest office?
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Jim and Nancy Bildner and the Robert and Virginia Schiller Foundation, the Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation, upholding freedom by strengthening democracies at home and abroad.
It really matters when you have an opportunity to give back.
Being part of something that's bigger than myself, that's what brings me happiness.
Being able to integrate your professional career with some of these other things that are important to you, it's critical to be happy at the end of the day.
You know, this is our community too, and we want to participate and give back to it.
People want those opportunities to make an impact and a difference.
The John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, fostering informed and engaged communities. More at kf.org.
And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. President-elect Donald Trump began putting his new team in place, announcing that his campaign manager, Susie Wiles, will be the White House chief of staff when he takes office next year.
Wiles is the first woman to be appointed to that position, and during his victory speech Wednesday morning, Mr. Trump praised Wiles for helping engineer his sweeping victory.
Susie likes to stay sort of in the back, let me tell you. The Ice Maiden, we call her the Ice Maiden. Chris, come here, Chris. Susie likes to stay in the background. She's not in the background.
A veteran of Florida politics, Wiles ran successful campaigns for Senator Rick Scott and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis before running Donald Trump's winning bid for re-election. For a closer look, we're joined now by Mark Caputo, national political reporter for The Bulwark and previously covered politics in his home state of Florida for years. Mark, it's great to have you here.
Hi, thanks.
So in a traditional White House, the chief of staff oversees strategy, coordination, policy decisions. It's arguably the most important personnel decision a president can make. What, if anything, can we take away from Donald Trump's selection of Susie Wiles to serve as his chief of staff?
That Donald Trump wants to stick with a winning team. He enjoyed great success against what seemed like great odds this cycle. His two previous presidential campaigns were always marred by sort of infighting, drama, and in some cases, like a great amount of incompetence. One of the reasons he was so thrilled in that clip that you played from his election night victory speech was that he had a winning team that didn't really have any of that. Now, there was a little drama at the end, but that was more of Donald Trump's fault. That was Donald Trump's fault, not the fault of his campaign co-managers. The thing about Susie Wiles is that she has had a reputation of being a winner. She's not a braggart. As he said, she likes to stay behind the scenes. She is known for being sort of egoless. She serves the principle, and she makes sure to kind of execute their will without getting too much in the way. You didn't hear any leaks of her sort of reining back Donald Trump or talking down to him, or any sort of appearance of folks in the campaign trying to sort of defend their reputations when it looked like things were going south. None of those things happened. And a lot of that is attributable to Wiles, the people that she hired, and the sort of the drama-free environment that the campaign itself ran on. Now, not Donald Trump, but the campaign itself.
Susie Wiles worked in Florida politics for decades for a number of moderate politicians. She's even described herself as a moderate. Why Donald Trump then?
Well, she worked for Donald Trump in 2016, running his Florida campaign when people thought, and when the polling showed that he wouldn't win Florida, and he won. And Trump was very happy about that. But Susie Wiles' first big race in Florida was Rick Scott's in 2010 when he ran for governor. And at that time, Rick Scott looked like he had no prayer of winning the state. He did. Wiles got a lot of the credit. Then in 2016, you had Donald Trump run his race. In 2018, Ron DeSantis ran his gubernatorial race. And when things were going real south for him, who did he call? He called Susie Wiles. Now, the two of them had a falling out. That wasn't Wiles' fault. That was a result of Governor Ron DeSantis' paranoia and inability to accept the fact that people were giving her a measure of credit for his win, which he just couldn't stand. So he tried to wreck her reputation and her career. She got back on her feet, got back on President Trump's reelection campaign in 2020, working in Florida again. She helped him win the state. Obviously, he lost that race. But he realized in 2021, when he was in a real bad spot, no one thought he could make a comeback. It was after January 6th, and he wanted to give it another whirl, and he wanted to make sure he had someone competent, someone he could trust, someone who wasn't going to sort of self-promote and cause him trouble. And really only one name rose to the top of the list, and that was Susie Wiles. And President Trump is very happy he made that decision.
Wiles has said that her specialty is creating order from chaos. It raises the question, Democrats had said that if Donald Trump were to win re-election, that there'd be no guardrails. He'd surround himself with loyalists who would do his bidding. Would it be a mistake to perceive Susie Wiles as a guardrail potentially?
That's a difficult question to ask, because what we don't have insight into, and what Wiles wouldn't talk about, are those times where she may have, and undoubtedly she had, just kind of statistically, an advisor advises a principal. And eventually the principal, even Donald Trump, is going to take the advisor's advice. So there were undoubtedly times where she told him, hey, please don't do this, or try to kind of nudge the ship of SS Trump in the right way. It's a very difficult process if you talk to people who have been advisors, who are advisors or confidants of Trump. And so she undoubtedly did that. However, Donald Trump also does what he wants to do. And there's always that fundamental tension that runs through his organizations. So, to the degree of comparing Susie Wiles to a guardrail, I think it's fair. But it's also important to remember that Donald Trump is an 18-wheeler, and sometimes he careens down the hill at top speed. And there's no amount of guardrails that can necessarily prepare against that. We have seen in this election cycle, though, that whatever you want to call it, the guardrails, good advisors, selflessness, luck, or Zen, Susie Wiles played a really key role in that, perhaps the key role.
Mark Caputo, national political reporter for The Bulwark. Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it.
The day's other headlines start in the Netherlands. Dutch authorities are investigating what led to a wave of attacks last night on Israeli soccer fans in Amsterdam. It followed days of tensions leading up to the game. Stephanie Tsai has our report.
The game between Israel's Maccabi Tel Aviv and the Dutch Ajax team ended in a tie. What happened after, outside the lines, was a clear loss. Hundreds of riot police deployed across the city after chaos and violence erupted. This a scene showing a mob running with clubs. And this an eyewitness video capturing Israeli fans running in fear. One says, "I'm not Jewish," as he was repeatedly punched and kicked to the ground. Israel's embassy in Washington posted this footage showing a cornered Israeli fan. More than 60 people were arrested and 5 victims were hospitalized and released. But tensions had been mounting for days, and the aggression was not one-sided. Video from the night before the game shows Israeli soccer fans cheering as someone tears down a Palestinian flag. And police chief Peter Halle told reporters that Maccabi Tel Aviv fans had attacked a taxi driver and burned a Palestinian flag the day before the game. Israeli fans were also captured chanting "F the Arabs" as they descended an escalator ahead of the match. In violence following the game, the mayor of Amsterdam said the assailants actively sought out Israeli fans. It's unclear whether the attacks were pre-planned.
Boys on scooters crossed the city in search of Maccabi Tel Aviv supporters. It was a hit and run.
Fans who witnessed the violence described what they saw as they returned to Israel today.
It was very frightening. I saw people get beaten. I saw people get inside hotels and lock themselves. I saw people throw people into the water, the freezing water, and they drove on people, they stabbed people.
Dutch and Israeli officials decried the attacks as anti-Semitic. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu compared it to an attack on Jews in 1938 Berlin that preceded the Holocaust.
Tomorrow, 86 years ago, was Kristallnacht, an attack on Jews just for being Jews on European soil. It's back now. Yesterday, we saw it on the streets of Amsterdam.
Following the mayhem, Amsterdam has banned demonstrations for 3 days and granted police emergency power to stop and search suspects. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Stephanie Song.
In Southern California, firefighters are making progress in extinguishing a wildfire that's destroyed some 130 structures, mostly homes. For nearly 3 days, the mountain fire has blown through more than 30 square miles in Ventura County outside Los Angeles. Wind gusts are finally starting to ease, allowing some residents to return to the charred remains of their homes while others assess what they've lost.
The fire was there. There was black, heavy smoke with debris just flowing at us. And I didn't know if our neighbors got out, and my phone didn't work, so I didn't know if anybody was stuck.
First it skipped us and it started burning our neighbor's house past us. We thought we were okay. Evacuated anyway, and today came back and the house was gone.
In the meantime, on the other side of the country, fires are burning in parts of New Jersey. At least 4 blazes have broken out across the state, which is dealing with high winds and dry conditions after a month without any significant rain. The FBI, the Federal Communications Commission, and other agencies are investigating a wave of racist text messages that are being sent anonymously to Black Americans. They've been reported in several states, including New York, Alabama, California, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee. The exact wording varies, but the messages, like this one, often tells recipients they, quote, have been selected to pick cotton at the nearest plantation, instructing them to be ready with their belongings. Some also include instructions to appear at specific locations. Middle schoolers and high school students are among the recipients. A federal judge struck down the Biden administration's effort to provide citizenship to some undocumented spouses of U.S. citizens. A district judge in Texas said the administration stretched its interpretation of immigration law, quote, past its breaking point. President Biden announced the policy in June. It would have allowed undocumented migrants who are married to citizens and stepchildren of citizens to apply for a green card without having to leave the country first. It would have benefited nearly 500,000 immigrants, but had already been put on hold and would have faced an uncertain future under the new Trump presidency. The United Nations Human Rights Office says close to 70% of fatalities from Israel's war in Gaza have been women and children. In a report published today, the UN says it's verified the details of more than 8,100 people killed in Gaza between last October and early September of this year. Of those, more than 2,000 were women and more than 3,500 were children. The report also says that most of the fatalities came in attacks that killed 5 or more people, and about 80% were in residential buildings. UN officials blame Israel's use of weapons in densely populated areas for the destruction.
Given the pattern of strikes throughout Gaza, and the fact that they have not only killed and injured so many people, but also destroyed fundamental social structures and support networks of Palestinians in Gaza, they raise serious concerns that Israeli forces have intentionally attacked the very basic fabric of Palestinian society.
Israel says it's been targeting Hamas militants in Gaza after Hamas's October 7th attack last year, in which 1,200 people were killed and more than 250 taken hostage. The Justice Department unsealed criminal charges today in a murder-for-hire plot to assassinate President-elect Donald Trump. The complaint alleges that Farhad Shakeri was tasked by an Iranian official with formulating a plan to surveil and then kill Trump in the weeks before the election. Shakeri has spent time in American prisons for robbery. He remains at large and is believed to be in Iran. Separately, a Ukrainian official tells PBS NewsHour that Elon Musk joined a phone call this week involving the president-elect and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The official said that Zelensky thanked Musk for his Starlink satellite service, which provides internet access in Ukraine. On Wall Street today, stocks closed out a blockbuster week with modest gains. The Dow Jones Industrial Average added more than 250 points to close just shy of 44,000. The Nasdaq added about 17 points. The S&P 500 tacked on 22 points, capping its biggest weekly gain since last November. And the 2025 Grammy nominations are in. Beyoncé leads this year with 11 nods, making her the most nominated artist of all time. Texas Hold'em raked in 3 nominations for Record Song and Country Song of the Year. It's from her album Cowboy Carter, which itself is up for both Album and Country Album of the Year. Today's nominations bring Beyoncé to a total of 99 Grammy nominations over her career. Post Malone follows this year with 7 nominations, as do Billie Eilish and Kendrick Lamar. Taylor Swift collected 6 nominations, along with first-time nominees Sabrina Carpenter and Chappell Rowan. And we want to bring you the story we've all been talking about in the newsroom today. A police chief in South Carolina says there is, quote, almost no danger to the public after 43 monkeys escaped from a medical research compound. The problematic primates broke loose from the Alpha Genesis facility in Yemassee, South Carolina. Police say a new employee didn't fully shut an enclosure, allowing the rhesus macaque monkeys to escape. Police are advising residents to close their windows and doors and call 911 if they see one. Still to come on the NewsHour, how Americans' views on female leaders played into this year's presidential election. David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart weigh in on what's ahead with Trump elected to another term. And the fashion industry tries to preserve artisan craftwork after clothing factories move overseas.
This is the PBS NewsHour from the David M. Rubenstein studio at WETA in Washington, and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
In this deeply polarized country, there have been a range of reactions in response to former President Trump's re-election this past week. To better understand how many in the country feel, Judy Woodruff checked in with some of the people she's met during her ongoing reporting project, America at a Crossroads.
You know, I won't tell you that I'm not surprised. I'm surprised it was as big as it was, but I am happy. You know, this is the person I wanted to win. This is the mandate I wanted America to see.
Last night when I went to sleep, there was still hope. But when I woke up this morning, I saw that he actually won. It was a feeling of, here we go again. We're back to, you know, we're moving back in time.
Some very different and very strong reactions from some of the Americans we have met across the country about what took place this week.
The first day we had early voting here in Massachusetts. I voted for Donald Trump, and I was excited throughout his campaign because I saw him as hope.
I think it was a very comfortable and very happy feeling that he's going to be back in charge.
Well, I was really, really excited, and to be honest, I always had faith. I was never really doubtful that he would win.
I'm still in shock, but I didn't cry this time like I did when he originally won, so that's something.
Why do you think you didn't cry?
I've lost my naivete about Americans and the goodness of them.
I woke up really early, just like I just roused, right? And I just checked my phone, being like, oh, it's going to be totally fine. And then I was just awake and I held my son, and it's not the future that I wanted to give to him.
One of the reasons that I didn't vote for Donald Trump was because of the last election. So I feel like I need to stand on that now, that these are the election results. This is what the American people want. And we go from here.
Supporters of former President Trump found many issues to vote for. Top among them, the economy.
With the prices and the difference and the variety of things that we are already purchasing, you know, from food, groceries to gas, you know.
I expect it will open up opportunities for jobs and manufacturing. I suspect it'll keep a lot of jobs in the area.
So for you, is it mainly the economic piece of this that matters to you? Is that fair to say?
The economics certainly a big part of it. Another part of it would be, you know, the concerns I had over. It seemed like there were many on that side of the aisle that wanted to control speech, that wanted to shut people down, that wanted to censor.
Well, the other thing is illegals coming across this country. There are so many people here we don't know.
You know, being male and white in recent years, we've been told that we're the problem in society and we're always the ones causing issues. Everything that's going bad, everyone that's oppressed, quote unquote, is being oppressed by white men. And, you know, DEI and all these things that are meant to lower the amount of white men in any sphere are things that Trump ran on.
Harris supporters, as well as one woman who voted for Jill Stein as a protest against U.S. support for Israel, felt concerned about where things might be headed over the next 4 years, including on the economy.
I know so many people that can't afford rent, they can't afford to have food, they're working 2-3 jobs. It's a serious issue. And then we have people like Trump that's going to come in and he's a businessman. His only interest is his business. That's only going to make things worse for the American people.
The tariff that he's going to put on China for import, not just China, but on imports that's coming in, that's going to cost people like me, who a lot of things I have in my home says made in China or made here or made there. And if there's going to be a tariff on it, we're going to have to pay more money for these things.
I think it's going to be terribly different. Maybe not for me. I'm an older postmenopausal white retired woman. But I had friends that texted me yesterday that their transgender children were up all night having panic attacks and crying. I have a niece who's in a gay marriage. I can imagine the Supreme Court is going to be going after that.
I am wildly concerned for my family specifically. I'm wildly concerned about a lot of things, but I gave birth to our son. My wife is my legal wife and spouse and is on his birth certificate. I am very concerned that legally my marriage will be dissolved and that my wife will not have the same legal rights to our son.
My hopes are that what other people see in him is what will happen. My hopes are that I'm wrong on how I'm reading him, and that this is going to be a turning point. My fear is that the worst of this will result in us being more separated, us feeling that other Americans are the enemy and we're not all one team together.
Some Trump supporters said they hope this could be an opening for the president-elect to find common ground with the other side.
I would hope that that's an effort within his cabinet and within the people that he puts in leadership, that, you know, that we have to work together. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. We have to work together.
You know, this guy's a deal maker. He likes to make deals with people. He is on the same page as a lot of Democrats, and yet they cannot seem to find common ground.
I mean, if Kamala got in, I would have been, okay, here we go. What am I going to do? But I wouldn't go out in the streets and burn cars and turn things over. I would try to see, what is she going to do to make it better for everybody?
I would say the election points to the fact that we're not as divided as we might have thought. That it's not about identity politics. It's not about, I'm sure millions of Americans who voted for Trump don't like him as a person. but it shows that we have things in common. We have beliefs in common. We want legal immigration. We want a good economy. We don't care that he might, I think I said the same quote a few months ago, last time we talked. We don't care that he might say some off-color things. We don't care if he has a mean tweet.
I see no hope of him unifying the American people. I think he's a rotten human being. Every time he speaks, he denigrates a certain group, whether it's immigrants or I could go on and on. We all know what he's like.
If I'm at work and I'm rooting for Larry to get the promotion, but Darren gets it, then either way, I'm not personally invested. That's the logical part of me. The emotional part is I'm concerned of where we're going to wind up at the end of this.
I've seen a lot of hate come out of people when Trump was in office, when Trump lost the election. I've seen a lot of hate come out of people. And some of the hate that I saw coming out of people were some people that I knew for years.
I am unwilling to compromise who I am as an individual for somebody else's comfort. I am unwilling to go back in the closet. I am unwilling to go back to being a woman instead of the non-binary person that I am. But building bridges where they can be built, yes, absolutely.
I think we all struggle with the same things at home, paying our bills, holding down a job, taking care of our families. Healthcare is a big issue for all of us. We have the same problems, and we have in my opinion, a common enemy, which is these politicians that use us to gain power and money and whatever it is that they're going for.
They should all have the betterment of this country first and foremost.
Democrats have an opportunity to work with Trump to put the brakes on some of these mega mergers, multi-borderless corporations that pay taxes into the Netherlands or Ireland or something like that. They have an opportunity to bring some of that back to this country.
I pray that people can work together, okay? You know what? The person you want in there is not in there, but he's going to be there for 4 years. What can we do to make things better? How can we work together to make America better?
For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Judy Woodruff in Washington.
For the second time in 8 years, a woman ran for president and lost to the same man. Despite strong support among women of color, Vice President Kamala Harris lost ground with nearly every other demographic group compared to Joe Biden in 2020. A number of factors separate Hillary Clinton's run from Harris's, and a number of factors went into Donald Trump's win. But once again, the question is being asked, is America ready for a woman in the White House? Aaron Haynes is editor-at-large for the 19th News, and Kelly Dittmar is with the Center for American Women and Politics at Rutgers University. Welcome to you both. And Aaron, I'll start with you. There's a number of factors at play. We know the economy, a truncated campaign, frustration with the incumbent. But what do you take away from what we saw with voters in terms of how much gender played a role, that there was a woman at the top of the Democratic ticket?
Well, I wrote about how elections are not just about either of the candidates, but really about who we are as a country. And again, what do we know about who we are as a country this year? That America is still not yet ready to elect a woman to lead our country. The issue of gender, not necessarily something that Vice President Kamala Harris was emphasizing, but it was absolutely looming over this race. And when you think about, American voters really prioritizing the economy, immigration, maybe not seeing a woman as the person that embodied the characteristics of strength or power around those issues. I think that this was absolutely an election that was gendered. We definitely saw former President Trump coming back into the White House on a message of his particular brand of masculinity. I think that we cannot have a conversation about this election without having a conversation about the role, the ongoing role of gender in our politics, and continuing to ask the question, what is it going to take for a woman, for this country to ever elect a woman president.
Kelly, pick up on that point that Aaron made about Trump's campaign, which was clearly geared to appeal towards men, and he did very well with them. He won some 54% of the male vote. But it was one group in particular, white women, which is the single largest voting bloc at some 40% of the electorate, who did help propel him to victory, some 53% of white women voting for him. What did you see in that? What fueled that vote?
We need to kind of shift away from the question of, is America ready for a woman? I mean, the majority of women voted, or majority of voters voted for a woman in 2016, but to really understand both white women's voting behavior and voting behavior across the board is to look at what are the racism and sexism in our electorate that is allowing us to continually vote for somebody who's proven that he is misogynist in both his own personal behavior, but also in his policy priorities, has tapped into racial resentment within our communities, and that these things aren't disqualifying. And for white women in particular, we've seen time and again, it's not disqualifying enough, in part because they have a racial privilege that is being protected by this brand of politics. And we're going to have to grapple with that, I think, continually to get to the point not only where we can elect a woman, but where we can elect candidates who are trying to move us forward when it comes to racial and ethnic inclusion, gender progress, and gender equity.
And Aaron, I know you've reported on this and written on this extensively. This is the second time there's been a woman at the top of the ticket, but only the first time that there's been a Black woman at the top of the ticket. What role did you see that both racism and sexism that we know are still very real animating forces in America played in this election?
I think they definitely played a role, but I do want to talk about, the 92% of Black women that showed up to vote for Vice President Kamala Harris, how excited and energized they were about her unprecedented campaign, how hard that they worked to try to get her elected. Black women have long been regarded as the backbone of the Democratic Party. And so to see somebody who shared their lived experience at the top of the ticket felt, for a lot of the Black women that I talked to, a lot of the voters, a lot of the organizers, a lot of the long time kind of political folks that have been around in the Democratic Party, to see that for them really represented kind of a return on their investment. Their investment being their voting loyalty over so many years to the Democratic Party. And so circling back with a lot of those same Black women, where they are right now is that they are feeling abandoned by a party that they have supported so heavily and so loyally for so long, and really wondering what it is, about Black women that other groups somehow are not necessarily able to stand with, and white women in particular, because, I think that we saw when Vice President Harris became the candidate for the Democratic presidential nomination, there were some white women who were publicly kind of reckoning with 2016. White women did not in the majority support Hillary Clinton then, somebody who shared their lived experience, and wondering if they were going to make a different choice this time around and stand with Black women and other Democrats in voting for Kamala Harris, but that did not end up being the case. And you have to ask how much of that, we know the history of white women and what they have chosen to do with suffrage since they got it. They first got it in 1920, and frankly, at the expense of so many Black women suffragists who also stood shoulder to shoulder with them, but were then thrown under the bus when the 19th Amendment was passed more than a century ago. I think that history absolutely looms over this election for so many Black women. When it came down to, white women choosing between their race and their gender, I think we see how that played out.
Kelly, it is worth taking a look at the last 50 years in the U.S. Yes, gender equity has made a lot of progress, right? But facts are still facts. Women are still paid some 84 cents on the dollar compared to men. Women make up less than 12% of C-suite roles. Women are half the U.S. population. They only make up less than a third of Congress. Is it reluctance that you see, or an inability largely among the general population to see women as leaders?
Yeah, I think, as you know, we've made progress. I think it's a little bit of both, but it's also some backlash. You know, Susan Faludi wrote a book called Backlash that we can tap into again and look at in this election and in how Donald Trump waged his campaign, which was in fact taking that progress that you've pointed to and reminding a subset of voters that this is somehow threatening, right? And that's true along lines of race as well. Since the day Donald Trump began campaigning, he tapped into white male grievance politics, saying, for example, you know, society is becoming too soft and feminine. That's something his supporters are more likely to believe, based on Public Religion Research Institute data. Or men are being punished just for being men. Gender is a binary, and we shouldn't move beyond that. So we saw that in the anti-trans rhetoric throughout the campaign for Donald Trump and other Republicans down the ballot. And so while we see these gains, we have to remember that progress is not inevitable. It takes the effort and momentum from everybody, including groups like white women, to push back against those who are saying that this progress is somehow bad and threatening to their own communities.
That is Kelly Dittmar of Rutgers University, Aaron Haynes from the 19th News. Thank you to you both. Good to speak with you.
Thank you.
For more on Donald Trump's re-election, we turn now to the analysis of Brooks and Capehart. That's New York Times columnist David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart, associate editor for The Washington Post. Welcome back.
Hey, Jeff, good to be here.
So we've had a few days to assess the implications of Donald Trump's sweeping victory, winning the Electoral College and the popular vote, the first time a Republican has done that in some 2 decades. David, what does his really decisive victory reveal to you about this country?
You know, I think since 2016, we've entered a new political era. And the period between 1980 and 2016 was the information age. And we decided that America was moving to a post-industrial economy led by college grads. So many of our policies were oriented to favor college grads. Education policy, let's get everybody to 4-year colleges. Immigration policy, let's provide college grads with cheap labor, even though the less skilled people are going to face some labor competition. Trade policy, we allowed manufacturing jobs to go overseas while service jobs were not threatened in that way. Geographic policy, we had a laissez-faire attitude where talent congregated in Austin and Dallas and Washington and Boston, and we didn't really worry about all those places left behind. And so to me, we had a policy that favored college grads and disfavored everybody else. And basically in 2016 and emphatically last Tuesday, a lot of people said, I've had enough, we need a change.
Jonathan, do you see that same kind of realignment, that the new fault line in our politics is education level?
It's one of them. I mean, I don't disagree with anything that David just said in terms of his analysis, but we cannot ignore what was being discussed in the last segment there with Aaron Haynes and Professor Dittmar. The role of racism and sexism, misogyny, grievance, white nationalism, that was very much a part of Donald Trump's campaign. And I think we need to acknowledge it, we need to talk about it, and then I think as a country, we need to confront it. We've never done it in our history. We probably won't do it now, but I think we need to acknowledge the fact that the incoming president of the United States openly ran on racist messages about fellow citizens, non-citizens, people who have always come to this country seeking a better life long before Build the Wall. So yeah, we could talk about education realignment, we can talk about political realignment, but until we talk about the grievances that Donald Trump exploited, as Professor Dittmar said, we're going to be in this mess for a while.
What about that, David, that wasn't disqualifying?
Yeah, well, a million things have shocked me that have not been disqualifying about Donald Trump. I personally think Donald Trump is clearly misogynist. I think he's clearly a racist. I think that's been in his family for generations, frankly. But to make that argument, somehow you also have to explain why the gender gap went down, why Kamala Harris did worse among women than Joe Biden did. Somehow you have to explain why Trump got more black voters than any Republican since Richard Nixon. Somehow you have to explain how he massively improved Republican standing among Hispanic voters. And so he created this broad network. And the way I would explain those phenomena is race and sexism are clearly major facts in American life. But I think in our politics, class is rising in salience and race and gender are falling in salience. And when you say people had to choose between their race or their gender for about white women, you're ignoring that they have brains and that they have economic views, they have social views, they have a million other views. And so those views are part of how people make their decisions, not just an ethnic identity.
It's all part of the stew. And all I'm arguing is don't ignore the potatoes and the carrots while also focusing on the meat.
Okay, I'm all for eating. No, I am on a protein diet right now. So
You know, one thing about this election stood out to me, and it's this. In state after state, you had voters that backed both Donald Trump and ballot initiatives that advanced progressive goals. So you had these laws protecting abortion rights that were backed by the majority of voters in most states. You had voters in 2 red states, Alaska and Missouri. They approved measures to raise the minimum wage, to ensure paid sick leave, and yet those states also voted for Donald Trump. So voters clearly had in their minds a different picture of what the presidency meant.
I mean, this is maybe the new form of ticket splitting. Before it would be you would vote for the president of one party and then vote for the governor or the senator of another party. Maybe it's breaking down along issue lines. I don't know, but clearly maybe those folks don't view the presidency as seriously because it feels so removed. Whereas your vote, wait, my state's going to raise the minimum wage. I get to have a say in that. Fine, I'll vote for that. Or reproductive rights, fine, I'll vote for that. Recreational marijuana, fine, I'll vote for that.
How do you see it?
Yeah, well, I'll come back to my class analysis. If you're working class, you might like Republicans on some things, but you also like rising the minimum wage. You also like eliminating the tax on tips. And the whole country is shifting to the left on abortion, left and right. And so these things are not inconsistent if you look at it, who's a populist? And populist, they want to funnel money to working class people who are the kind of people who are working in minimum wage jobs. It's also been interesting to watch the Californians vote left for president, but on the ballot initiatives, they threw out 2 progressive attorney generals, and in Northern California, they adopted very aggressive criminal penalties against shoplifting and vagrancy. And so they shifted right based on the issues they're feeling at the moment. And that's my basic view, which is why it's so important to learn from the electorate. They are telling us something about their own lives, and it's complicated.
Yeah. Well, as Democrats second guess what went wrong, the Speaker Emerita, Nancy Pelosi, told the New York Times in an interview, she said, had the president, Joe Biden, gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race. The anticipation was that if the president were to step aside, that there would be an open primary. And as I say, Kamala may have. I think she would have done well in that and been stronger going forward, but we don't know that. That didn't happen. Do you think that's right, or that there were just more fundamental issues about how Democrats were perceived that ended up being too much of an obstacle?
Oh, that's for me? Look, this is the thing that Democrats do that drives me nuts, the finger pointing and the blame gaming almost immediately. Look, what happened, and to go back and second guess decisions that were made, I just don't think are helpful. I think what would be helpful is to start thinking about how does the party recover? How does the party go about doing what David is saying in sifting through the information that we got from the voters, and then plan accordingly? Because I don't, as sad as I am about how the election went, and particularly how people voted, it is my hope that the Democratic Party can figure out a way to reach those voters, not just the ones who didn't vote for them, but for the folks who didn't show up at all. Because the one thing that I noticed is that Donald Trump and Vice President Harris got fewer votes than their counterparts in the previous election. We also should be talking about that. Why did so many people sit out?
Yeah. Well, what are you watching for as Donald Trump puts together his team and then prepares to take office again with the experience of knowing how to use the levers of power and potentially having a Republican Senate. Well, he will have a Republican Senate, but potentially a Republican House.
Yeah, I'm looking to see how organized he is. You know, in the first term, there was no policy process, and he passed some things, but it was all policy chaos. Is it going to be like that again? Will Republicans? I'm most interested in NATO and on Ukraine. Will he have, in my view, a sensible foreign policy team that, of course, they're not going to want to spend as much as the Democrats were spending, but they still need to put pressure on Putin and on tariffs. Donald Trump was vastly helped because there was an inflation. And if he imposes 20% tariffs, we will have a lot of inflation. And are the Republicans really going to walk into that, eyes open? I just don't know.
Same question, Jonathan.
He might be more organized this time. The one thing I'm watching for and worry about is whether the Republican majority, let's just assuming they also get the House, overreach. They are, if anything, they are always guilty of overreaching. And it's just a matter of at what point will the American people say, you know what, you have gone too far. And maybe Trump's comments today about beginning mass deportations immediately because we must do this, maybe that will be like the first sign of overreach.
Okay. By July 1st, he'll have overreached, I guarantee it.
David Brooks and Jonathan Capehart, thanks to you both.
Thank you.
In the 1980s, about 70% of all clothes sold in the United States were made here in the country. Today, it's down to just 3%, with most factories moving overseas. One of the casualties, traditional craft work, like weaving fabric, cutting leather, and polishing gemstones. The fashion industry is now trying to preserve these crafts. Special correspondent Pavni Mittal reports from New York for our Arts and Culture series, Canvas.
If you see, the cardboard is off, so you have to push it a little bit towards me. Unroll it.
It's only her third day at work, and Auden Muka is getting a masterclass.
We're going to take our hand like this and start.
George Kalasian is teaching her the age-old technique in pleating fabric. He gathers cardboard folds to mold the material underneath. This handiwork and precision takes years to master.
Okay, good. Now.
This isn't something you can learn online, especially with a tactile skill where you need to be doing it by hand. You can't learn it any other way, and it's not really taught in schools either. So you have to find a craftsman, a master, to be able to learn from.
Tom Sons International Pleating is a multi-generational business. Kalasian's grandfather started it in Lebanon. In the 70s, when the Civil War broke out, the family moved to New York City. Experts in pleating, they work with the biggest names in high fashion. Over the years, business has been shrinking, as companies are increasingly producing overseas. Kalasian says immigrants made New York the fashion capital. Now that American dream is hanging by a thread.
We have centuries and centuries of knowledge that comes to this melting pot of New York City, where all of this technique and craft mixed together. One by one, the artisans have been either dying or retiring or moving on. And as a result, the knowledge is going with it. It's the technique. The technique is what is dying. And technique is something that enables you to make something efficiently and effectively.
The garment district in the heart of Manhattan was once the country's sartorial capital, packed with hundreds of thousands of workers making most American clothes. Over the years, costs rose, work declined, and most studios emptied out, leaving a few thousand artisans and traces of the industry that gave the area its name, along with an art installation and this statue, remnants of a glorious past. Just like this district in New York City, fashion hubs around the world are seeing a decline in craft work. To address this, many high-end labels are investing in training the next generation of artisans, starting workshops, expanding apprenticeship programs, and even partnering with fashion schools here in the United States. In this workshop, traditional craftsmanship melds with modern technology. The nerve center of creativity and innovation for iconic jewelry brand Tiffany & Co. It's also where it trains its next generation of makers. It's running a 2-year program teaching skills like welding metal using laser machines. The first cohort graduates soon. Many hope to land a job at Tiffany's. Programs like these are part of a larger recruitment strategy. Tiffany's is owned by the world's largest luxury conglomerate, LVMH. It's facing a record shortfall of thousands of craftspeople across dozens of brands like Louis Vuitton and Dior. To meet its needs, it's expanding its flagship apprenticeship program, training and recruiting 2,400 artisans over the next 2 years. Historically, these were based in Europe. Now, LVMH is bringing them to the United States.
We have so many skills in the US, and you have so many people that are basically attracted by craft. And we have such an opportunity to find new talents. When we started the program in the US, we had so many candidates, and we have very good results because, almost 90% of the person at the end of the day, at the end of the training, have a diploma, and almost 70% of the people are recruited in the maison.
Some young artisans are also taking on the mantle to save the crafts. Gigi Burris O'Hara is a milliner. She sources materials locally and all hats are handmade. Once a thriving industry, it's now down to a few suppliers. Many closed during the pandemic. To revive it, she started a non-profit, Closely Crafted. It's running after-school programs to inspire young talent to go behind the scenes.
The workforce is primarily in their late 40s, 50s, and 60s. And so there's been a tremendous gap between individuals that are in this aging workforce and the new individuals that are coming up. We're talking about 10 to 20 years difference. And if we continue to see that workforce age out, we are not going to capture that generational knowledge. So the time is now. It is very critical that we can get young people placed into these jobs, that we can make these jobs stable and livable.
Some initiatives are focusing on inclusivity. Custom Collaborative helps low-income and immigrant women build careers in sustainable fashion, teaching basic skills and mentoring them when they start working.
They do teach you all the ins and outs of business, and one day I would love to own my own business. And I feel like the program offers all the trainings, the ins and outs, as well as the financial part.
With this exercise, we're going to learn how to pivot.
Custom Collaborative has trained more than 75 women in 8 years, many recycling material to make clothes.
We're fully sustainable, so everything that we make comes from a fabric that was donated or headed for landfill. So like this silk came to us from a lingerie company.
Ngozi Okaro is the founder and an activist. She says being eco-friendly is only part of it. Their larger goal is to make the industry more equitable.
We do hear a lot from companies here in the U.S. and here in New York that there is a need for what we're providing. And I think especially when you get to the sustainability part of it, people are so focused on making sure that their garments that they buy and that they wear didn't infringe on anyone's rights, that they are not going to pollute the landscape. And so we have an opportunity to really reshape sustainability and to make it better and bigger and bolder and more inclusive.
Lower the needle.
Artisans are hoping the revival of craft will change the very fabric of the industry. In this age of fast fashion, they want to restore value to creating with time, love, and passion. For this, they need to raise awareness and alter customer demands. That, they say, will move the needle. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Pavni Mittal in New York.
And I'll show you what we're making.
And there's a lot more online, including our PBS News Weekly show that looks back at this historic week in politics. Digital producer Dima Zain spoke with correspondents Lisa Desjardins and Laura Barone-Lopez about what comes next after this Trump victory. You can find that on our YouTube page.
And don't forget to watch Washington Week with The Atlantic tonight. Moderator Jeffrey Goldberg is here with a preview. Jeff?
Thanks, Amna. Coming up tonight on Washington Week, we'll be discussing how Donald Trump won back the White House and what he'll do with the power he's been given. That's tonight on Washington Week, here on PBS.
And on PBS News Weekend, how the Biden administration's handling of the war in Gaza shaped voters' choices. And that is the NewsHour for tonight and this week. I'm Jeff Bennett.
And I'm Amna Nawaz. On behalf of the entire NewsHour team, thank you for joining us.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by On an American Cruise Line's journey along the Columbia and Snake Rivers, travelers retrace the route forged by Lewis and Clark more than 200 years ago. American Cruise Line's fleet of modern riverboats travel through American landscapes to historic landmarks, where you can experience local customs and cuisine. American Cruise Lines, proud sponsor of PBS NewsHour.
At BDO, I feel like a true individual. People value me for me. They care about what I want, my needs, my career path. I matter here.
The ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Jim and Nancy Bildner, and the Robert and Virginia Schiller Foundation. The Ford Foundation, working with visionaries on the front lines of social change worldwide. Funding for America at a Crossroads was provided by and with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.